Tonight on Pen the Writer's Utopia, I'm super excited to be hosting none other than sci-fi, fantasy, and epic screenwriter Ron Newcomb. Come on, y'all, let's go into the Utopia so we can enjoy this episode.
Hey, I'm Ron Newcomb with the Ford Studios, and we make movies. Welcome to another exciting episode of Pen the Writer's Utopia. Listen, I am super excited tonight to be hosting one of my oldest screenwriting friends and colleagues. Listen, we go way back, y'all. But I'm excited that he's here with me tonight, and we're going to have some fun talking about screenwriting. So let's go ahead and get into it. Welcome, put your hands together, and welcome to the Utopia, Mr. Ron Newcomb. Hi, Ron.
Hey, T. Hey, Utopia. Good to be here.
Awesome. How you been doing?
I'm doing good. I'm trying to survive during this pandemic, of course. A lot of us writers are trying to stay busy, turning pages. So we have no excuse. COVID does not impact us writing pages. So that's what we should be doing.
Listen, if that ain't the truth, I'm like, if you said that you didn't have anything to do right now, you wrong, because there's more than enough opportunity to get that screenplay, get that book,
Definitely.
get that play written, right?
That's right. You got to write that screenplay. Now's the time.
Yes. So I know a little bit about you, but tell our viewers a little something about who Ron Newcomb is.
Yeah. So I grew up just outside of Washington, D.C., in suburbia, not really much excitement there, just growing up playing sports, not knowing that I had this creative itch that I wanted to scratch, that I really got in through acting. And I went to college, and they didn't really have any sports at this college I went to. So I tried to audition for this play, and ended up getting cast, and just got addicted to the creative. Go down many years later, I actually went to LA to try my hand at acting, and it was right during a recession. So kind of crawled back home, which is in the DC area, a little bit more humbled, and ultimately became, after a short stint in the Marine Corps, became a police officer for a time, and did that for about 6 years. And then went and worked at a nonprofit where I ended up getting a master's degree in counseling. So completely unrelated, except for the fact that, we pull stories from all over.
Absolutely.
This gives me a lot of layers to pull from. After working at that nonprofit, which was a church actually, for 4 years, I ended up doing my first feature film. I helped some friends out do some video work on some films, but it was just as digital started to actually become something, and it was trying to decide if it was going to really be something or not. And so the following year, the Red camera came out, right? That was like the great equalizer. And it really was. It looked beautiful. It was cinematic. There was no more excuses. And now, of course, hindsight, we can look back and see everybody's shooting digital now. And even if you shoot on film, you're turning it into a digital format to edit on. So I did a feature film, and I was able to capture the Lord of the Rings IP in a video game and attach that to my film, because I couldn't afford an A-list talent. So I needed to get some type of IP attached to it. And as a result of that, getting that video game and particularly that IP together, it was just as the third Lord of the Rings film came out, I ended up getting a distribution deal out of that. So, we sold in Netflix and was in Walmart and Amazon and all that stuff. And I made enough and became just addicted enough to want to keep going and telling stories. So started a company called the Ford Studios. And that's what we've been doing. We've been trying to tell stories of hope and light in a dark and dying world. That's what our calling is, our mantra is. I predominantly do fantasy and sci-fi, but it doesn't mean I don't have other stories to tell. So I've done a ton of short films to kind of keep the muscles going. I do a lot of writing, but I'll say that I'm not a great writer. I have prolific writers that I partner with, and I either am the first draft person and then turn it over to them and they kind of take it the rest of the way, or the reverse is also true. They'll do a first draft and then send it to me, and I'm a great rewriter. But, writing is just hard. It's not a muscle we flex easily. Nothing really comes easy. All of us have experienced that, writer's block or a challenge to get through a scene. And that's why I really like the partnership element to it, that pull in other people to kind of do that. So also as a result of the Ford Studios, I pulled together some creatives because in the DC market, we do think tanks really well. And I pulled together some filmmakers in the fantasy and sci-fi space. And as a result of that think tank, we ended up creating another company called the Fantasy Network. So if you go to thefantasy.network, it's a streaming platform for independent fantasy and sci-fi content, from shorts to episodic to features. And again, we didn't intend to become distributors. We're just content creators, but we knew we needed an outlet. Otherwise, the voice of the independent is getting just, it shrinks every time one of these studios gets gobbled up by the other bigger studio. Everybody has a streaming platform now. Everyone's doing original content in-house, and they're not really taking independence on. And so our voice becomes less and less. So we have to give ourselves a voice. We have to step into that space. And that I've been also kind of working on as well. So that brings us up to current time. Now, that doesn't mean I do it full time. I've been able to do it full time over several iterations. But I think it's important for us independents, particularly writers, to know that just because you have a job, a regular 9-to-5, doesn't mean you're a failure. It took me a little time to get through that because I was like, man, because I did do it full time, I was like, man, the fact that I'm not doing it full time, it was frustrating, and it felt like I was not there. But the truth is, I'm just being responsible. You're being responsible by having a 9-to-5 job if you're out there paying your bills. It doesn't mean.
And I was going to say and that's a great point that you say there, because sometimes as writers you do feel like you can't do both. You know that you need to do one, but depending on what the other job is, sometimes you feel like it's draining you. It doesn't really leave you time to do what you love. But where there's a will, there's a way. Because I remember I used to work like the swing shift or the midnight shift. And the first thing I would do is when I got off from work, would come home and I would write for about an hour or so before that was my way of putting myself to sleep, I would bring my brain down by creating. And then once I got that out, I was able to go and get some rest. But that's a great point that you make, that there are times when you may have to do both, and that's okay. I like how you pointed that out.
Yeah, no, in fact, I think you very likely will be doing both. And it's just hard psychologically not to think, oh man, I'm failing in one form or fashion. If you look at like The Rock, like I'm a big fan of The Rock. I think a lot of us are. This guy gets up at like 4 a.m. and then doesn't go to bed till like midnight. And if you follow him on Instagram, he's doing like a leg workout at like 12 midnight and he gets up at 4 a.m. He's putting in the work. He's putting in the time. If he can do it, if he's willing to do it, then, there's no excuse, right? If you are creative, then there's a resource and an outlet for you. And that's good and bad at times because, the market now is so saturated that it's hard to break through the noise. There's so much noise that us independents are making and creating, but then there's also so much competition, not just in films. I'm talking like trying to vie for someone's time, like video games or, whatever streaming platform or, whatever it is. We have to find a way to break through the noise, as creatives. So,
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. You brought up some great points. I'm gonna have to go back and get a couple of them that I want to point out. One thing that you said that was big in the beginning, you said, I'm not a great writer, but I have a team of great writers around me and we collaborate. I love that. And that is something that is very, very key. If it's not your strong point, at least have a great, in this case, a great co-writer or someone that can come back and do your rewrite to help you put that into place. Like when we used to do with our writers groups, that was one of the things we used to do when we had our writers groups. We would double check behind each other to help each other see what areas the story needs to flow. Having a team of other writers around you, it's great because it boosts, as creatives, to have another creative around you, it just boosts the creativity and it gives you an opportunity to see past whatever you may be struggling with. They may be able to see the fix for you. So collaboration is very big and very key. And I love that you pointed that out too. I don't have to be the greatest writer in the room as long as I have other great writers around me to help along the way.
No one turns in a finished first draft. It's never going to be perfect, but it's nice to have that other writer, that other collaborator. I feel safer because I know someone else is going to read this and help me take it the rest of the way. So I definitely love the collaborative process in filmmaking. Filmmaking is just like life. It's not meant to be a solo sport for most of us. Some people resist that. They want that control. They kind of need that. The buck stops with them. But to me, I like that collaborative, creative spirit that you can find in other collaborators. I see Alan Greenstein has said he's doing both, and good for you, Alan. For, doing the 9 to 5 and then putting in the time to get your writing in. Turning your pages. You've got to be writers write. If you're not writing, you're not a writer. It's kind of like filmmaker, that phrase, that title gets thrown around a lot. And then when you find out some of these people, they've never done a film and you've never gone through the grit and the grind film will resist you every step of the way. You have to pull a film into existence. It doesn't want to be birthed. You have to pull it into life. It will fight you. And so those people that have done that, those are ones that I'm like, all right, that's a filmmaker. They know they've had to pull this film through. Do you realize that close to 90% of films wipe out in post-production? They don't get finished. So I think it's important to finish stuff and to be a finisher. That to me is a filmmaker. And everything that I've done, it's not like it's a home run. That I finished those things, got it over the goal line. So I think there's something to be said when you're saying, hey, I'm a writer, I'm a filmmaker. Make sure that that's not just a title we just label ourselves, but we're actually doing it.
And I say that, I'm glad you pointed that out, because I always say, as a matter of fact, I think I posted this the other day, writers do write, but you have to exercise your muscle. Writing is a muscle. And if you're not writing on a regular basis, then it's just like working out. If you don't work out, you get out of shape. The same thing happens to writers. If you're not writing, then you get out of shape. And if I be transparent, I have had moments, you guys, where even I have not been writing, where life took on, its course. And in this case, like we were talking, sometimes you got to work your full-time job and you're writing. There were times when my full-time did take away that energy, where I didn't have time because of family, working full-time, family, coming home, commutes, and all that good stuff interfered. And my writing muscle did just that. It got out of shape. But just like Ron said, if we're going to call ourselves writers, then we have to put pen to paper, fingers to typewriters, however your mechanism of writing is. You have to do it, even if it's just sitting down for 5 minutes, 10 minutes a day. Start small, 10 minutes a day if you've gotten out of shape, right? And or if you're new to it, spend 10 minutes a day just writing something towards your product, but you have to, your project, I'm sorry, but you have to exercise your muscle, because if you don't, it's just like your regular muscle. It's going to get out of shape and it's not going to work for you as well as you need it to.
Yeah, exactly. I mean, you need to be putting in the time. If we say this is a passion, if this is a calling even, then we should be putting in the time just like anything else, and shouldn't expect anything less to get there. Otherwise, it kind of undermines all the people that are sacrificing. If we just are easily able to say, oh, I'm a writer. When someone says, well, can I read something? You're like, well, I don't have anything,
I don't, yeah.
I don't have any. Well,
you gotta have something.
Writer. You might be putting some words on a paper, but writers write, and me as a storyteller, I tell stories. So, I have 23 projects right now in various, levels, not all finished, but just 23. And I don't mean like an idea or a thought. All of them at least have log lines. Projects. All of them have one sheet. Yeah. I put together I have just a running list. So I have a folder that when I get a writing idea, I'll just get it out of my brain and put it as much as I can down and put it in that folder, and I set it aside. And if I find myself thinking on it often enough, I'll go back to the paper and start writing it. Once I do that, it formulates an idea, and I put it on my in works project list. And I'll never in a lifetime probably be able to get all those projects done. But to me, that's okay. I don't want to end up in my final days realizing that I'm finished and there's no more left for me to do. That's not the way I think it's going to happen. I think I'm always going to be wanting to create. I'm always going to be wanting to. And my job is not to try to go after success. My job is to do what my calling is. And as writers, we write. As filmmakers, we film, we create. And as producers, we champion projects and we get them over the goal line. And directors need those things. All these other people, actors, need those things so that they too can do their calling. We all know it starts with story. Story is king. Yes. Story is the mantra that the creatives must go back to. That's the lightning rod. That's what anchors us. And it's the one thing that allows us to be able to kind of move out on together as creatives.
Yeah. Yes. Listen, I love that. Listen, you keep dropping nuggets, so I'm gonna go back and get your nuggets because I want to make sure everybody's getting them right. So your folder of ideas, I love that you keep that folder, right?
Yeah.
And what I want to say to everybody is, when you are a writer, you're gonna have tons of things that inspire you. Understand that sometimes the project. Note what he said. Note what Ron said. Sometimes the project comes or the idea comes to you. It's not necessarily meant for you to move on it right now. But what did he say? He writes it down. He puts it in his folder. For you, it may be a notebook. Not sure, but put your idea. Have somewhere that you store your ideas. And if that idea begins to speak to you on a regular basis, then it's time to pull it out and to start working on it. But it's okay if you don't move on it right now. Sometimes things come to us that's not meant for us to work on right now. Maybe it's something future wise, but don't let your ideas go down the toilet or go off into la la land and nowhere because you did not write it down. Mm-hmm. You have to write your project. You have to write it down. Write your ideas. Have a log that you keep your ideas in. That is a great nugget for all of the writers, regardless of what your medium is, whether you're a screenwriter, an author, a blogger, whatever it is. A good practice is just what he said. Make sure you're putting those ideas to the side and let them brew. And when they start to speak, pull them out, or when it's time. Understand sometimes it'll come and it's not time, but it doesn't mean that it's not your idea to work on. I love that, Ron. You've given some great nuggets for our writers here.
Yeah, thank you. I appreciate it. Appreciate that, Alan. I think that sometimes I get an idea and I think it's an idea, but really it's just a scene, or it's a cool. I had a friend of mine, we would drive around and we would see these cool locations and he would be like, oh man, how cool would it be to film there? And I know what he meant, but I was like, what story? It doesn't start with the location, really. It starts with the story, right? What story are we going to put there? Yeah. So sometimes when you think, I think I have an idea, but when I write it down, I don't have an idea. I might have a neat scene and I realize that's all this was. There's not enough there to put meat on the bones to make it a real story. Because I'm not just I don't just write words on a paper. I'm a storyteller. So there has to be the elements of story. Who is my hero? Who's the antagonist or in the antagonistic force? What's coming against them? What's their objective? What's their goal? Can I see those things? And that's, to me, when it starts to solidify that I have the elements of a story. And then, is the character interesting? Is it timely? All those things start to come into matter and then come into play. As an independent producer, it's hard not to put the producer's hat on. You have to be careful, though, because you want to write and just tell the story. But there's also a time where I'm like, hey, I'm going to film this. So then I also need to put the producer hat on. And that might be, how big of a scene am I writing? Right? If I'm writing that Netflix is going to fund it, then sky's the limit. But if Ron Newcomb is going to fund it or go out and try to find the funding, then suddenly it goes from, 50 extras to there's 2 extras in a quiet room. You need to figure out, writing, particularly in a screenplay, that's different than writing novels and things, long form storytelling. We don't have the luxury to kind of, as a screenwriter, to kind of take that time to kind of do it. And then as a producer, we don't have the luxury where sky's the limit. And even then you want to, Netflix and stuff, they all are trying to be fiscally responsible. But, the point is that when you're writing it, you're putting it down, you're vetting for the project. And then I'm also saying, because I believe you should have 3 projects as a screenwriter. This is specific to screenwriters. You should have a project that you can film right now. So this is a under $20,000 project. You can go out there with your friends and pull together people to film right now. You should have your $1 million project, something that's around $1 million. And when people say, well, how do you know that? Well, just find another like-minded film that we're talking about and try to gauge that to kind of see. That gives you an estimation. You can go on boxofficemojo.com and see budgets and things. And then the third type of project should be your blue sky, sky's the limit. It's 50 million and above. The only way you're going to get this film made is if a studio buys it. Have all 3 of those. Allow yourself to dip in and out and flow between them. But right now, I'm really fixated on what projects can I do right now. And so I literally am just finishing up. I just finished up a rewrite on a action independent film called Brawler, which is kind of a martial arts 80s throwback, which is a little different than the fantasy sci-fi project. I had to throw just a touch of sci-fi in there. But what I did was I went to a sales agent. Now, a sales agent is not a distributor. They predominantly will sell your film to the foreign markets. And I went to them and said, what are you selling right now? What do you need to sell? And they were like, by far, action is our highest one. So I went out and set to write an action feature film, again, that I could film. So I was very specific budget and things of that nature. I didn't blue sky it. And so I created the idea kind of around what we could do, what we had, what do we have access to, and things of that nature. So I first put on the producer's hat, and then with those limitations, those guardrails, then I allowed my creative to write. And again, I have a great writing partner named Jay Lowe for this project, who really put the meat on the bones. I kind of had the story, but he really put the meat on the bones. So
I have a question for you, because I want to make sure that we cover this before our time runs out. But as a storyteller, what is your preferred method for breaking down your story, like breaking your story and making sure that you're hitting a flow, that everything falls in order? Is there a method that you use to make sure that your story flows? Because we all know that people can sit down to write a story or write a film, and it makes absolutely no sense. You have the wrong scenes in the wrong places and the wrong, climaxes in the wrong place. Like, how do you ensure, what is your preferred method or your tip that you can give our viewers on a great way to make sure that their story is hitting the right points at the right time, and that it flows?
So I'll give you a little bit of an analogy. Anybody that's taken martial arts at any time, they know that there's, you start out with a white belt and you go all the way to a black belt, but by the time you're a black belt, the white belt, you have to know the form. You have to know the form. And you do that all the way up to, but by the time you're a black belt, you're not really doing Taekwondo so much. It's really morphs into my own martial arts style. It's the Ron Newcomb version of Taekwondo. I'm not doing exactly the basic punch. I'm doing my own style. I say that to say that that's kind of the way that I take my writing. I've done it in all forms. I have outlined it. I've done cards. And I have just started on page 1, not knowing where it would take me. I've done all those things, and I find myself going back to the basics, to that white belt, to ensure that I'm hitting those points, because when I don't hit those basic points, I end up writing almost like a novel, where that's not what you do in a screenplay. And I get very complicated in my story. It becomes way too layered. And if I had done those basics in my writing, I would have not done that. I know a lot of people resist formula. I find myself really embracing that. I really like that. I love the hero's journey. I follow that, not pragmatically. I'm not a militant about it. Like I said, I've done I've done an outline. I've done Save the Cat. I've done all these things to kind of help me get there. But I at least need an outline to know where I'm going. And I give my characters enough freedom to kind of move within that parameter. It's not so dictatorial or so detailed that it's finite, but also it's helpful because when I have a writing partner, and most of the time I do, not every time, but most of the time I do recently, we can say, I'll take these 4 scenes, you take these 5 scenes. Much easier because we've done the outline and we both know where we're going. But even then, though, I find that you need one voice, one lead writer, even out of the team. So I'll send my pages to him, and then Jay will kind of mesh it together. And so it's really more of Jay's voice in that first draft. And then he sends it to me and it's hands off, and I'll take it and I'll put my layering over top of it. So I've done it all different ways. I would say that, outlines I think are very extremely helpful, and you have to know the basics. Don't resist formula just for the word formula. When you hear it, people tend to resist it. Like, I don't want to write formulaic, but even the greats know how to do that. They just know they're now black belt. Tarantino, they know how to put that stuff. But if you were to look back at it, you can see those basic movements in there, the basic plot structure, the setting up in Act 1, the turn, the call for the hero. All these things you see once I'm not saying I'm a black belt, but once you start to get some behind you, you start to see, oh wow, I see that's that's the mentor character. I see that now. So that's I like to give finite answers. I know that wasn't a finite answer, but I hope that does help.
It wasn't, but it gave a great it laid it out very well, because the sum of what you basically said is learn the basics, and then as you go along, which is another thing I always say, at least learn the foundation first. And then once you have the foundation, then you can go and shape it to what fits you. But you first got to learn the foundation. And so that was great information. Basically, go back and learn a foundation, because that's what you've done. And then you find ways to work around that in your own style now. So it was a good answer, Ron. It was a good answer.
And when I mean, you learn the basics, you don't necessarily, it's very helpful if you know grammar and spelling, but don't get so caught up in that. You can go back and there's,
fix that. Yes.
And there's people you can even pay to help ensure that your grammar's right and that comma's in the right place that it's supposed to.
Right.
Write your story. Don't get so caught up in those types of things that you never tell your story. Get your story out there. Your first draft, again, is going to be just that, a first draft. It's not going to be a home run, and that's okay. Just get it out there, and then you can start to fine tune it, right? Rewriting.
Exactly. So the basics is know the structure of what a screenplay, what should happen in your screenplay.
Yep.
And then work from there. Just
100%.
learn your structure. Learn the structure and then work from there. Absolutely.
Yeah,
so
actors,
it has been.
Yeah, actors mimic, and we're okay with that. Actors, they'll see one of their actor they appreciate, and they'll mimic them. But us writers, we're kind of shamed at doing that. But I think you should do that. You should see some of your writers and emulate what they do well, some of your writing style. Use them as a mentor, even if you don't know them. See who you like and who you write like, and not necessarily mimic them directly, but use them almost like they're your sensei and follow kind of their pathway. I hope that's been helpful.
It was. And I was actually just about to ask you, did you have one word of wisdom that you would like to leave our writers and our audience and viewers with tonight? And then you broke out with that. So is that the nugget of wisdom you want to give, or did you have another one that you would like to leave the viewers with tonight?
It's kind of what we started out with. If you are a writer, if I can, or T can convince you not to be a writer, then if I can, I should be able to, and you should not be a writer. If there's anything I can do to talk you out of being a writer, let me talk you out of it. Don't do it. It's grueling, it's hard, it's all those things. But if I can't talk you out of it, if it is a calling and a passion, and you have a story in you that is bursting out and you must tell it, then be the best writer you can, and write often, and write with passion and conviction. Don't worry about the small stuff. If you're a writer, write.
Yes. If you are a writer, write. Come on now. That's the word of wisdom tonight. Ron, it has been such a pleasure talking with you tonight. Thank you so much for your wisdom, your information that you shared tonight. It has been so helpful. I know someone out there definitely can relate and receive what you shared. Shout out to Alan. Thank you so much for watching tonight and joining the conversation. You don't know Ron, but Alan is one of my favorite people, one of our biggest fans. He supports a lot in my shows, so I certainly appreciate you watching tonight, Alan, and contributing to the conversation. For the rest of you guys, whether you're watching live or if you watch the replay, go on and join the conversation. We'll check back and forth. If you have questions for Ron, we'll definitely check the screen and the comments so that we can get you guys questions answered. But thank you so much for just joining me tonight. It's so good seeing you. I have not seen you, it feels like, in forever. And now that you've moved to the West Coast, the odds of me seeing you soon, maybe, I'm not gonna say slim to none. Anything's possible, but we're on two different coasts now for sure. So I certainly thank you. I wish you so much joy and prosperity with your studio and with your projects that's going on. I'm so glad to see you thriving. But listen, guys, I thank you guys for watching. You've been great. Be sure to share with your other friends that are writers, especially the screenwriters, y'all. This was some great nuggets of wisdom that I'm sure will help them along in their journey. And as my friend Ron said, remember, writers write. Today is a great day to get on down there, write out a few ideas, okay? Go write something great today, all right? We appreciate you watching. This has been Penn, the Writer's Utopia, and see you guys next week.